Hello and welcome to Coffee with Carrie. Thank you for stopping by today. One of my own cups. A beautiful day begins with a beautiful mindset. I don't know if you've been to my shop where I have all my coffee cups, but I'll leave a link to that in the description box. And I'm happy you could be here today. If you're new, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Carrie. I am a matchmaker, a dating coach. And this channel, we talk all about dating and relating. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about the age gap, what people consider socially acceptable, and the differences between ages of partners, whether they're married or coupled. Seriously, everybody seems to have an opinion. I always think it's funny. I have an episode from a while back, two actually, one on why some men prefer younger women and why some men prefer older women. I will put them both at the end of this episode if you have missed those and are interested in checking them out. But people will leave a comment and talk about their own relationship where there's a difference of 5 or 7 years. And I laugh a little bit inside and probably say, that's not really an age gap. That's perfectly within normal limits. I don't think anybody would say anything about a 7-year difference. Typically, when they're talking about an age difference, it's 10 years or more would be considered by some people to be an age gap. I've got a lot of air quotes going on. We're going to talk about all that today, a couple studies I read, and let's start up by discussing the 7-year rule. Are you familiar with that one? Leave me a comment down below before you leave and let me know what you think is an acceptable age gap between a couple and what's the age gap that you have in your relationship now, your current relationship, or what you seek in a future partner. I would be interested to hear that. The age gap, I hope you'll stick around because that's what's on the agenda. The rule, and I'm doing air quotes under my desk, is half your age plus 7 years is the maximum allowable, acceptable difference. So for somebody who's 50, that would be half your age, 25 plus the 7 years. You would not be with anybody who is younger than 32. So somebody 40, you do half your age, 20 plus 7, you have a 27-year-old and a 40-year-old. So somebody 70, interestingly, we go 35 plus 7 is 42 and 70. Interesting. Obviously, this is a rule. I think it was created, rumor has it, in France somewhere many, many years ago. It's been mentioned in movies and in novels. Malcolm X referenced it at one point. Been around for years, and that's the rule of half your age plus 7. So take that for what it's worth. Most people in relationships, typically in the United States, are between 3 and 5 years apart in age. 3 to 5 is a very typical age spread for people, and a lot of younger people are looking for somebody their age or within a couple years of their age. So that is what they are seeking, is what they are getting. Now it gets interesting as people are looking for a partner the second time. So when looking at that 7-year rule, it's supposed to work in both ways, that if you are 30, you double your age to 60, subtract 7 years, and that would be the maximum age partner you would be looking for. You know, I really am not a fan of rules in romance. I think we are all able to set our own parameters for things that feel comfortable to us, but I also think that even setting a rule, we often end up breaking our own rules when love comes into the picture and is part of the equation. My own thoughts have always been that it's more dependent on the person. You know, it's cliche to say age is just a number, but when you connect with somebody, you have the same values, the same interests, you enjoy their company, you have an attraction, and you have common goals. Those numbers, they take a back seat to a lot of other things. My marriage was to somebody who was about 8 years older than me, and my second long-term relationship after that was somebody who was 20 years difference. So I don't think one or the other was more mature, especially not when I met them. They were around the same age. But it really had so much more to do with the person, and I wasn't really thinking so much about the number when you're having that excitement of connecting with somebody. Those rules seem to just go out the window, I think. Now, interestingly, we don't always get to determine what other people think of our relationships. So I think this comes more into play with what is considered socially acceptable and where people are going to make comment or notice or talk behind you behind your back. I don't know. I think that it depends more so on who's paying attention. Why are they paying attention? One of the things that was interesting in my larger age gap relationship was that we met on a dating app. And a couple years after we met, we found out, and there was 20 years difference between us, we found out that the app we met on had changed the parameters that you could search. There had been a problem with older men messaging younger women. So men in their 50s were messaging women in their 20s, and all the women in their 20s were complaining that they were not interested and they didn't like that. And in response to their request, they changed the app so that a 14-year span was the maximum allowable for people to message each other. And we thought that was funny because we were 6 years off and we never would have met had we been on the exact same app a couple years later. And I think that you don't go out looking for an age gap relationship. Sometimes it just happens to you, and you can decide whether that is important to you or whether connecting with somebody that you feel inclined to be romantic with is more important to you. Statistically speaking, in Western countries, 28% of couples have a relationship with an age difference of 10 years or more, and only 1% of couples have an age difference of 28 years or more. And the breakdown on that was that 85% of those relationships, the men were older, and obviously 15% the women were older. So obviously that's how it breaks down for those of us in the United States and our friends surrounding us. You know, I think about the age gap and the fact that people think it requires rules in the first place. These rules are man-made, right? They're just made by another person. Why would somebody else be more wise than I would be in determining who I am connecting with and want to be in a relationship with? You know, we have great friends of all different ages and across, lines of gender and age and race, ethnicity. Why should there suddenly be rules around who we can be romantic with? So rules in general, knowing that they were made by people, I have to look at them. I'm not great with rules, and some of them make perfect sense, like wearing my seatbelt. There are other rules that are nobody's business but my own. I'd be super interested to hear what you think. What do you think would be an acceptable age gap between partners in a couple? Do you have an age gap in your own relationship of more than 7 years? If you have a real gap, 7 years or more, let us know down in the comments section. Now, there are a couple things that we need to be aware of in these age gap relationships because they're fine between consenting adults, obviously, but there are a couple things that can become problematic due to the age gap. And one of those would be to be making sure that you are on the same page as far as long-term goals, especially around family. I know a lot of age gap relationships that did not last as long as they may have had those people had a conversation about whether or not they wanted children, whether or not they truly didn't want children. So being on the same page as far as goals for a family, I think that would be really important to have a conversation about that early in the stages of an age gap relationship. Same thing for careers. Sometimes people are edging towards the end of a career or at the peak of their career. Somebody may just be starting out and making their way into the career that they've chosen for themselves. And I think there's a great opportunity here for mentorship from one partner to the other, but you do have to be careful in that dynamic as well, that it doesn't become an unequal power play there, and that there's no parenting going on. Being a supportive partner and mentoring somebody because you have more experience is fine, but you have to watch the dynamic of that, or somebody can feel like it's off and it can get out of kilter and not work for that reason alone. We don't want the dynamics of anything that's controlling or codependent in any relationship, but it also happens, and maybe even a little bit more so, it would have a tendency to in an age gap relationship. Couple studies I looked at. One, they found that men were willing to date women that were far younger than they were, but most women felt that the maximum they would consider acceptable for themselves was 10 years. There was a Dutch study where they went out and talked to people, both genders, aged between 20 and 70 years old, and they went out, thousands of people out on the street, grocery stores, restaurants, shopping, different neighborhoods all over, and they asked these people what age range did they feel was appropriate for 1, marriage, 2, a loving dating relationship, 3, just a sexual relationship, or 4, just fantasy. And they found that women were very consistent throughout their 20s to their 60s. They felt that 10-year age gap was the maximum they felt was appropriate for them in all of those situations, so throughout their lifespan. And with men, they found that as they got older, the age gap grew in order to include women who were much younger than they were. This episode is definitely not about me making judgments, because I've run into people who have had opinions across the board in my career as a matchmaker and dating coach. It is something I ask of all clients. What is the age range I'm looking for when I'm matching them? And or in coaching clients, I do want to know, who are we dating in this process? What are you looking for? And perhaps something needs to be shifted. Sometimes they won't go over 3 years from their own age, a woman of 50. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with a man of, if you're 50, why are you being biased against a man who's over 55? And we have to have a conversation, because they may be missing out on meeting somebody great who would be a fantastic match for them. And we seem to have different preconceived notions about people of certain ages and what they want to do, what their interests are, what their activity level is, their physicality, and what they look like. And I think there's always somebody outside whatever parameter you set for yourself who would surprise you. So I always try to open up people's minds to thinking outside any set rules that they may have created for themselves, or society may have created for them with a rule, like the half your age, add 7 years or so. I just don't want anybody ever to miss out on somebody who's really great, who would also really enjoy them, because they've made arbitrary rules and left this other person on the outside of the walls they've built around themselves, the walls of rules. Whenever somebody sets a rule, I can think of somebody else that I've matched who had said the same thing and is happily with somebody who did not fit their list or their requirements around age and a lot of other things. So life will surprise you, and you've got to be ready for the surprises, because that's what makes this whole thing fun. All right, I hope you found that interesting or helpful, maybe. If you did, please observe what my mother is suggesting. No, do it if you want to. It's a thumbs up. I enjoy that and I appreciate it. And I hope you'll subscribe to the channel. If you hit the ring bell, then you get notified every time a new episode goes live. So do that. It helps me out with the algorithm as well. Lets my episodes be shown to more people. I will look forward to seeing you back here again soon. And until then, thanks for being here today, and have a good one.